that be fact or fiction?
Why you got to do this to me? Why you got to make me say one negative thing about this dominant championship team? Because this, unfortunately, is fiction. I'm old enough to remember the 1986 Celtics, who had the same dominant statistical profile, 65 wins, had to go through Showtime and the Rockets and all that. It's still those dudes in 86, but this team's pretty damn good.
Fair enough. Then UT, how about UD? If I said to you, this Celtics championship could be the beginning of a dynasty, is that fact or fiction?
I got to go with fiction. I got to go with fiction. I mean, they have the pieces. You have a huge, strong core. You have Tatum. You have Brown. You have unbelievable role players. You have a coach that's coming to his own. In his second year, was able to get a championship. One of the youngest coaches since Bill Russell. So they have the pieces, but the East was weak. A lot of people were banged up, a lot of injuries, and you got to win more than one to be talking dynasty.
Fair enough. We'll talk more about that one in a minute. But finally, Zach, I'll come back to you. This one's an interesting one. If someone said Jayson Tatum has silenced his critics, is that fact or fiction?
It's fact, and I don't care that he didn't win Finals MVP because he's a champion, and he showed up huge in the last game, the clinching game, the toughest one to get, 31 points, 11 assists, maybe the best passing game in his career. It's a fact, but I will also ask, who are the critics? He's made first-team All-NBA 3 years in a row. I guess the critics would say he hasn't won an MVP or finished in the top 3 of an MVP, but I think everyone agrees Jayson Tatum's pretty damn good.
Let's stay in this. Cindy, let's not go. Come out to everybody.
Yes,
we were going to play some sound. I want to get to this because I was trying to sort of tiptoe towards this yesterday. And Jayson Tatum, there was a tweet yesterday that went out that said that he was the 6th player since 1980 to win a title, leading their team in points, rebounds, and assists in the playoffs. Here it is. And he responded by saying, what are they going to say now? And I understand that's become sort of the catchphrase of NBA champions. The Warriors were saying that a couple of years ago. But I sort of lean towards you. Criticism is a really strong word to describe the way Jayson Tatum has been covered over the years. I guess there have been some questions about exactly how to quantify his greatness, and I wanted my friend Dominique Foxworth to jump in on this as well. But pick up that thought. Do you feel as though he has been unfairly characterized or criticized during his career?
So I do think there is some merit to that because there was a lot of nitpicking of him, particularly after the 2022 finals against the Warriors, where he was not good enough and the Celtics weren't good enough. He was also 24 years old when they were in the 2022 finals. And that carried over into this season. And I kept saying this. Number one, first team All-NBA. Number two, he bizarrely did not get enough credit for 2 of the greatest elimination games in Boston Celtics history. And when you say in Boston Celtics history, that means something. Milwaukee Game 6 2 years ago, backs against the wall, down 3-2. He puts in 46 on the road on 17 of 32. And Game 7 last year, it's a blowout, so people wipe it away. You score 51 points in a Game 7, you should earn yourself a year of people not being able to say, what about a big games? What about big games? That's as big as it gets.
What do you think of it? Do you feel, you've been in the league, you've watched his career come along, how do you view the way he's been viewed?
I don't think it's unfair criticism. I think it's unfair expectation. I think coming out of Duke, the number 3 pick, we understand the history of Duke playing for Coach K, being a number 3 pick. Then you walk into the Boston Celtics organization who's known for winning, has championship habits, has championship expectations. You're 6'10", you have everything God can give you. 6'10", 220, you can shoot, you can score from all 3 levels. You can defend if you have to. You can rebound, which you showed in the playoffs and led them in rebounding. So you have all these utensils, you have all these skills, and these are things that we're looking at and we're saying, we want it right away, we want it now. But the expectation was too high for Jayson Tatum.
Dominique, I was interested in your perspective on this because you and I have talked a lot on this show, and I hear you doing it on your show as well, about the general tenor of media criticism, of social media criticism, and all of that. So when you hear Jayson Tatum say, yeah, what are they going to say about me now? What thoughts go through your mind?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny because Steph said it. It was obviously in response to people saying that he hasn't won the Finals MVP. And I think Zach is speaking of a world that he wants to create, but not the world that actually exists, because I know exactly what they're going to say now. They're going to say that you haven't won the league MVP, you haven't won the Finals MVP. I understand you can say that's not fair, but it's going to happen. And with great players like Jayson Tatum, we have to create storylines and we have to create a mountain for them to climb. He's climbed the most recent mountain, but it's obvious what we're going to say. We are going to be waiting for him to be that number 1 player that we always kind of expect our stars on teams to become. And it's fair to say that he hasn't been that. He hasn't needed to be that in this championship run, but he has not been that, and that is going to be the prevailing storyline for him for the rest of his career, just like it was for Steph, until he actually goes out and wins those Bill Russell trophies and the Larry Bird trophy and the league MVP trophy.
What do you think?
I mean, if the only standard that we have is you have to be the best player in the league, then what are we really even doing? That photo, that video, he's got the championship trophy. In the past, once you won that, you were immune for a long time from criticism. That's the whole thing. Was he finals MVP? No, he got 4 votes neck and neck. I don't care. He's the best player on a team that just won the championship. Move on.
To whom much is given, much is required. And I think that's just the battle that Jayson Tatum is going to face his entire career. He has silenced them now, but they'll be back. Trust me, they will be back. They'll be back next year and the year after. They're going to expect these guys to continue to do. We're talking dynasty. We're having these conversations now. So the expectation is we're going to expect these guys to be back there again next year and to do it. And he's got to be better because we understand that wasn't the best version of Jayson Tatum. He can be better.
And that's fair. And look, if they go back to the finals next year and he has a finals like Kyrie just had in the finals, he's going to get criticized. And that's fair. Criticize him on the merits of his play.
Or of the aftermath. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, their playoff run fell short to the Celtics in the NBA Finals. The two combined for 1,122 points in these playoffs, which is the most by any guard duo in NBA history. But our friend Chris Canty still has questions about the Mavericks leader.
We never questioned Dirk Nowitzki's work ethic. We never questioned his commitment to trying to improve his body and his game in order to contend in the championship rounds. We're questioning all of those things with Luka, and those aren't recent questions if you listen to Brian Windhorst and others that have covered him since he was playing pro ball in Europe. These are things that have been coming up. These were never questions for Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown. And that's why I don't know that Luka Doncic is going to be able to win a championship as the leader on a team.
It's an interesting take. And so let me, I can see the skepticism in Dominique Foxworth's. Well, I can't not address that. Go ahead. Before I ask you, D, a series of questions, why are you making that face at me, Neek?
I mean, we did question. Dirk was considered soft before he actually won the championship. I certainly don't want to get in the way of Udonis's take on this, but that seems one thing I know for sure is that Luka can win a championship. It kind of seems like a bit of an absurd take. I'm sorry to my man Chris Canty, but obviously you can win a championship with Luka as your best player.
Here's what's being questioned, though. So let's, whether we agree or disagree with Chris for the purposes of this conversation, what's being questioned is whether he is in the absolute tip-top physical condition that a player can be in, that he is, and that some people will suggest that goes to motivation, that it goes to total dedication and discipline and all that. Is that fair?
No, he's 25 years old.
25 years old.
He's 25 years old.
Okay.
You don't know what you don't know. Right now, to this point, everything has come easily to Luka. We see him averaging 30, and we see him almost doing a triple-double. He's leading his team in the playoffs in rebounds, assists, and scoring. He's the only person to ever do that in the playoffs, to lead the whole playoffs in rebounds, assists, and scoring. So we're witnessing greatness, and he's not in his best shape. He has to be challenged. Nobody has challenged Luka yet off the basketball court, working on his championship habits. This is where Jason Kidd comes into play. This is where that championship habit that Jason Kidd has, playing the Olympics, these are the things that Luka needs to work on. Not the basketball things that most 25-year-old guys need to go in the gym and lock themselves in the gym. Luka needs to lock himself outside the gym and work on his habits and his skill set.
You were making some interesting points to me in our conversation before the show today. You've seen that with other players, other young players whose games were spectacular, but those were things they needed to work on. Who were you thinking?
Well, you talk about LeBron James when we played and we lost to Dallas in the finals, and we want to talk about 2010 when that team first came together, and then we didn't get it done. Brian had to do some soul searching this summer. He had to focus on some different things and do some different things that he didn't have to do. LeBron James never wanted to play in the post. He had to get in the gym, and he had to get in the lab with Akeem Olajuwon. He came back and he played in the post. And we played a lot out of the post with LeBron in that era. So that was something that he had to do that he was not accustomed to doing, and Spo challenged him to do that. So we focus on things like that, and we talk about things like that. Jayson Tatum didn't get it done in 2022. We talk about his maturity and the way he's grown as a basketball player. For us, the Miami Heat, Frustrate him, get in him, make it about everything but basketball. Get Jayson Tatum to complain to the referees more than he's focusing on the game. He is not that player anymore. He has graduated. He has passed that test. You can't frustrate Jayson Tatum to the point anymore where he's focused more on the refs than the basketball game. So you have to go through these processes and these steps. I think this is just a process and a step for Luka. He will be better. He has to accept the challenge coming from his coaches.
Well, it's well said, but you bring up the best point, because the stuff with the refs is probably the single biggest complaint that I've heard from people about Luka. And in fact, Wendy, Chris Canty referenced the conversation you had with Wendy. Wendy went through a whole litany of times. We've seen that from Luka in big international games, playing for Slovenia, stuff that is as important to him as the NBA is. So that does feel like another legitimate area for criticism and maybe necessity for growth. And
it cost them points in Game 3 of the Finals, which is the one he ended up fouling out in a series in which they had no margin for error as the underdog. And look, UD talked about challenging him. They've talked to him about complaining to the refs 1,000 times in Dallas. They've talked about his conditioning, I'm sure, 1,000 times in Dallas. He can get better at those things. He will get better at those things. He's not the first player that's had to get better at them. Yes. We don't want to be having these conversations about him when he's 30, 31, 32 and be like, are we still talking about this? And there's been players that are in the league today and out of the league today that's been the case. But any discussion about Luka and what he is and what he isn't should start with these two things. They are nowhere without him. They are not in the finals without him. They are not in the conference finals without him. He is an MVP candidate every single year, every single season, and he is maybe the single most feared player in the league to game plan against, and that includes the Celtics. When you talk to Celtics coaches in the finals about this, man, we can't wait to get done with this dude. If we can just wrap this up, this dude is scary.
Right, that's fair. All those things are true. But you used an expression a minute ago, to whom much is given, much is expected. He's as gifted, Luka Doncic is as gifted an offensive player as we've probably ever seen in the history of the league. I don't think that's an exaggeration. So the question is, who can talk to him? I'm thinking of a story Charles Barkley once told on my old radio show on Mike and Mike, that when he first came into the league, Charles was having great success and all that stuff, and Moses Malone, in a locker room, like practically I don't want to misstate this, practically backed him into a locker and said to him, you're not in shape. You're not in the shape you need to be in to be the best player you can be, and that's what we need you to be. And Charles said it changed his entire career because Moses was someone he'd listened to. Who will Luka listen to?
Got to be Kyrie. It's got to be Kyrie. When you talk about a guy who's connected that locker room, you talk about a guy who's won a championship, who's been there before, who's been around the more prepared, more focused athletes ever in LeBron James, who understands how conditioning and preparation can take your game to the next level. That's got to be a conversation from Kyrie Irving. He's got to be the guy to have that conversation, and I think Luka respects him. I go back to the conversation after they beat the Clippers. That's my hermano. That's my brother. You talk about brother, you talk about brotherhood. Your brother can have those uncomfortable conversations with you, and you got to respect that.